Hello, good afternoon. Wow, that's loud. In full disclosure, I'm neither a physician nor a scientist, but I am a student of human behavior and a designer of products and services for people, most recently in healthcare. But at the core, I am a student of human behavior. And I have something really exciting, I believe, to share with you today. I'm going to talk about making human connections and how at times our brains can get in our way. I even have a few practical ideas to share with you. What I am going to share with you today all begin with a friendship between myself, a designer, and my dear friend Ted Barrett-Page, who's in the audience today. In fact, our friendship led us to an audacious collaboration, which led us to write a book about, of all things, relationships. More about that in a little bit. You might say my work is trying to apply what many of you discover and invent. I try to put the water in the buckets and carry it back to the village. I take my inspiration from many, many sources, and here's a recent favorite of mine recommended by Larry, Daniel Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. It's a great book. I'm sure many of you read it. It's groundbreaking, it's accessible, it's crossover, and as Larry says, it's black box. Kahneman introduces a shorthand, System 1 and System 2, faster thinking and slower thinking. This is all just to help us imagine and better understand two distinct thinking functions in our brain, or actually our brains. The French edition portrays System 1 as a hare and System 2 as a tortoise. This just helps to illustrate thinking modes that we are not fully aware of. We don't typically understand them, nor do we fully appreciate them. But they do exist all the same. And each is very useful to us when well matched to the task, but can be just as troublesome when mismatched. Here are some attributes commonly associated with System 1 and System 2 thinking. A key insight for me is that we typically over-identify with our System 2-ness, being in control, being rational, being reasonable. This is our preferred self-image, of course, but it is not entirely accurate. We live most of our lives, in fact, in a System 1 always scanning mode, which in fact is mostly a good thing, except when it's not. And I'm going to share some ideas about when it's not and how we might try to manage to this. So first, a couple of driving examples. The first one, System 1, is thinking fast. And this is critically useful at just the right moment. System 2 would be far too slow to help us here. On the other hand, System 2 is much more helpful backing into a tight parking spot. Here we need System 2 assets to clearly assess and plan and move through a specific set of instructions in a specific order. There are many modes of thinking and feeling which are present below our levels of awareness. These are evolutionary layers to our brain or brains, all within us, but not integrated as one, serving different needs, sometimes at odds, but all with purpose. System 1, sometimes portrayed as the reptile within, when under duress, leads to a fight, flight, or freeze response, with an absolute focus on our survival. But sometimes the reptile can misread a situation and seriously disserve us. Here are 3 common ways of going reptile in relationships. See if you recognize any of these. I certainly do. First, the runaway fight. This is an example, a clear example of fight or flight in action. Being under duress can quickly get out of control, a critical time to exercise caution. Runaway fight is a common example of being stuck in a reptile mode. Here's another example, had enough, or the angry withdrawal. This too is a risky approach. Had enough can send messages of abandonment and rejection to your partner. When couples disengage in anger, they are less likely to re-engage and resolve their issues successfully. And finally, worn out. Worn out can lead to more permanent disengagement and separation. And as the separation drags on, couples feel predictably less motivated to reconnect. Worn out couples can quickly become non-couples. This is a fast track from relationship stuck to relationship done. So besides coming up with clever names for unproductive relationship states, can brain science provide us with practical insights to improve our relationships? For many reasons, including some very close to home, I became very interested in this question. Let's look at another source of inspiration, the Stanford Marshmallow Study on delayed gratification. We saw this yesterday, and I love this for so many reasons. We get to witness the struggle within. We feel the tug of wanting what we want now. We see the struggle of controlling the urge for immediate gratification to receive a more significant reward later. And here, it's just kids and marshmallows. But this struggle between gratification now and gratification later is always within us. If we understand it, we might be able to get it working to our benefit. So, back to my collaboration with Ted. Ted's a well-known, highly sought-after marital therapist here in Boulder. And I was in marital therapy once, not with Ted, of course, but I asked my friend Ted for some advice. I was pretty desperate and very disillusioned with couples therapy. I asked Ted to share some hidden secrets of a successful marriage with me. And he did have some sage advice, for sure, but not what I'd call real secrets. It all began with a conversation with my old friend between the user experience designer and the marital therapist, a highly unlikely pairing, but all the better for it. We shared very candid conversations about the limitations of therapy, the health risks and profound costs of toxic relationships for the individual, for the couple, for the family, for the children, and so on. And I came to recognize the virtual epidemic of relationship dis-ease all around us. There is no silver bullet like penicillin for relationship dis-ease. And this was all pretty disappointing for me to hear, until it led to this audacious, multi-year collaboration, a collaboration to find some miracle drug for relationship health. Our initial goal was to stabilize the patient, an EMT-like approach, perhaps, and stop the bleeding. This seemed like a reasonably low bar, a good place to start, but it turned out to be harder than it seemed. Eventually, this led to our big, hairy, audacious goal, and here it is. Could we discover a reliable way to help make each person's next relationship interaction as good or possibly better than their last? But eventually we stumbled upon a notion about rules. We thought about the prevalence of rules in nearly every aspect of our lives, including games, sports, driving, on the playground, at school, and at work. Everywhere we looked, we could find no formal, explicit, or mutually agreed upon set of rules for relationships. We found mountains and mountains of relationship advice, but nothing we could really point our finger at and call rules. So why rules? What drew us to rules? Well, to begin with, rules are clear and straightforward. Rules help set boundaries and manage our expectations. Rules help keep us safe and playing nicely. Violating rules has clear consequences. And if we won't follow the rules, no one will play with us. All things we had been looking for in relationships, in fact. So we began to wonder, could we at last be onto something? And eventually, here's what we came up with, the 3 rules. First, stop before System 1 takes over and does real damage. Second, take a break and reset your systems. And third, return to your partner. Always return and try again. Initially, we developed this to create safety, to keep the reptile quiet, to stabilize the patient. But over time, we discovered that the rules help to foster trust, connection, and intimacy. Is this a practical application of brain science or just plain common sense? Either way, having rules in relationships really does work. We've tested these rules extensively with well over 100 couples in clinical setting and have had many remarkable results. So I want to look to another source of inspiration, another piece you saw yesterday. The etude was called The Unmasking. And I've come to interpret the unmasking as an artistic expression of the three rules in action. If you'll recall, first, at the outset, the masks are up. Some form of conflict is present. System one is clearly under duress, feeling threatened. The couple is disconnected. Each partner is shut off from the other. Here, notice how trying to connect in this agitated state actually makes matters worse. If they could only recognize the signs symbolized here by the masks, they might be able to stop. Here I began to sense that the couple was starting to recognize that pursuing interaction was not the wisest choice, and they might be on the path to stopping. And they do. If you recall, they create distance. They rest, they recover, they take a break. And eventually, when ready, when each individual feels safe, they come back together. The masks come down, they reconnect, and they begin to actually interact in a healthy way again. For me, the unmasking illustrates a natural cycle of healthy relationships. The reptile is put safely to rest. Safety leads to trust, trust to connection. In fact, happy and unhappy relationships both have basically the same 12 issues. The main difference is that in happy relationships, couples resolve their issues successfully. So, returning to science and to Kahneman, there's power in knowing what's inside us. We can't change what is, nor would we want to. Our best approach is to acknowledge, accept, and embrace this reality. Kahneman clearly tells us that we can't easily override System 1. What we can do is anticipate when System 1 may show up and plan accordingly, plan ahead. If you bring some mutually agreed upon rules into your relationship, you really are planning ahead. So, all relationships have conflicts. The key is to be prepared for them in advance, to plan ahead. In clinical practice, we find that couples that agree to the three rules in advance and practice them diligently are able to resolve their issues much, much more successfully. So let's review. Our three rules go like this. When the fire gets too hot, stop. Stop before the reptile takes over. Stop before System 1, in survival mode, causes you to say or do things you will regret later. And it's helpful to come up with a mutually recognizable signal to indicate your need to stop. Then, when either of you uses the signal, both of you need to stop immediately. When you do stop, really and truly stop. No last parting shots, no matter how tempting. Stop and exit gracefully. Then, take an effective break. Your job on your break is to work to reset, to put the reptile back to sleep, and to make a sincere effort to recover. And depending on the intensity of your upset, recovery can take some time. Don't rush it. Take the time and make the space to put the reptile at ease. And before you return, ask yourself these two questions. One, what do I appreciate about my partner? And two, what's my pinch of responsibility for this situation that we're in? If you can't find anything to appreciate and you can't take a pinch of responsibility, it's pretty clear that you're not ready to return. But when you do return, and you always should return, start slowly. Check in with each other. Really listen to each other, and try again. Now, as the therapist of our collaboration, Ted will attest, these rules really do work. The three rules are easy to understand, but of course, they're a little harder to follow, but still very doable and very rewarding. So, with a plan and some relationship rules, we can all work with the brains that we have, emerge with deeper, stronger, and more satisfying relationships.